Hi everyone, just make sure that I am sending you my audio feed. I hope you can all hear me, but it is once again so nice to see everyone virtually. You're on Music and Chat with Shirley Ong, and it's a good evening from me to you in Nashville, Tennessee. Please say hi in the live chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Don't be backward and coming forward. I do see several virtual bodies, so I expect you to own up to your presence. Our guests are waiting in the virtual green room. We had technical issues galore. It is not funny, I tell you what. But I got them online. I had to hang up just to let go of some of the resources, processing resources, just to get back on track with you guys. But it's so good to see you. Remember, there is the live chat where you can put your questions or comments if you have any, and I will address them as the stream moves along. I want to say hi to Gary, and it's a good evening from Gary in Frederick, Maryland. Anybody else, please say hello as well. Thank you heaps, Gary, for buying my Christmas set, and Frank and the rest of you who have bought the set already. I do have a collector's special to commemorate today's broadcast. Here's a long story short. In 2007, my band Xenovites played at Moog Fest that was held at BB King in Times Square, New York. I think it was called BB King's Blues Club and Grill. Artists who appeared included our guest today, Herb Deutsch, along with Don Preston, Jordan Rudess, Adam Holtzman, Sparling, Eric Nolander, Neil Alexander, T. Levitz, Gershon Kingsley, and our headliner was Thomas Dolby. BB King Times Square, New York sadly closed its doors in 2018, but my memories are locked in these postcards I have kept as a keepsake. You know, I need to do this mirroring thing so that you can see all the text right way around. So let me do that. So you should be able to see the text. Oops, Moog Fest. Can you see it? Here we go. It's got both sides, of course. The postcards are well kept. Ding. I have 9 of these, and I'm holding on to one, but the other 8 will go into the collector's set together with shrink-wrapped first pressings of Shelley Xenovibes, Music from Another Land, first pressing and jewel case of A Working Title Special Edition, second pressing of my 3rd album, Xing Paths. And also you will have the poster, my tour poster, which I designed myself, autographed to your specifications. So I've flipped the video around again. Artists who helped bring my music to life on the CDs included Michael Spicer, John Martinez, Dean Parks, Curtis Randall, Boo Macy, Tom Brisson. So as I said, I only have 8 of these sets. So let me know in the comments or live chat that you'd like to own one of these for 38. Here is the deal. 38 buckaroos, $6 shipping and handling. And as there are only 8, let me know early once the 8 sets are taken up. That is it for this set. Okay, so everyone, please, where are you? I see your virtual bodies and rising. Please say hello. Okay, so it is late. I'm sorry for the late start. Tech glitch, 7:15 p.m. Central in Nashville. It's 9:15 a.m. tomorrow in Singapore, 12:15 p.m. in Australia Eastern Time. So let's get the stream going. I want to play for you Escape, a piece from my 4th album, which is this one. It's called Escape, and it's for synthesizer. Okay, here we go. So that was Escape from my fourth album, A Working Title. So who else is here? Please say hello in the live chat. I assume you can still hear me and see me. We started a little late because of a technical glitch as per usual. They never cease to go on holiday. Actually, no, they never cease to want to work and not go on holiday. They should just go on holiday, and this is a good time as any for them to go on holiday, I say. But a little history before I bring our guests in. In the mid-60s, early 70s, the pursuit of a portable synth would have been an idealistic pursuit, if not for minds behind such companies as ARP, Buchla, EMS, and Moog. We spoke to Peter Zinoviev a couple of weeks ago, who talked about the nature of his beast, the PDP-8 computers, as well as the combined goals of Peter, David Cockrell, and Tristram Cary, resulting in the iconic VCS3 and the Synthy series synths. Today we're delighted to have Herb Deutsch and Jim Scott. Herb is all the way on the East Coast, New York, somewhere. And Jim Scott is all the way in Alaska somewhere. But they have brought their stories with them of discovery and innovation on the East Coast of America. I want to say hi to Mike Flavin. Hi, Mike. So glad to see you. Before I call Jim and Scott in, I tried earlier to get them by Skype, and it was a bit of an exercise. So crossing my fingers here. Let's bring them in. So I'm gonna call Jim first.
To reach is currently unavailable.
Okay.
Please leave a message.
I'm gonna try Herb.
We're on it.
Hey Herb, I can hear you. I just need to
Hello,
see you.
Am I on? I don't see myself.
Yeah, you just need to find the...
For some reason, I see Nancy, and why do I see? I know you're not even in. No, but you're up on the device. Okay, it's now your image. Honey, come in and bring your phone. Because I can hear her on the phone.
Oh,
yeah, I could hear
you
her on
just
the
need
phone.
to find the video camera icon and...
Yes, I know, but I don't see the icon to push. I understand. I know what I need to see.
Okay.
The video oh, there is the video.
No, that's no. I don't know which the video one is.
Wait,
is that it over here?
No, wait a second. Hold on. Let me see. Don't push. Don't.
No, I'm trying to bring things up.
Okay, this
That's the microphone.
Well, Herb solves his mystery. Ah, excelente.
Now you should be able to see me. Yes.
That is wonderful, Herb. Welcome. I haven't managed...
I do not see myself at all. The only thing I see on my screen is you filling the entire screen.
Oh, you should appear in the
I
top
know
right-hand
what I should.
corner of your Skype screen.
I understand that, but I'm not up there.
Oh, that's strange.
It just says Shriley is using a device that could record or broadcast this call.
Yes,
But
I am.
there's absolutely nothing on the screen except you. And
Oh,
that's the full size of the screen.
okay. Well, don't you worry about a thing, because we can see and hear clearly. I just need to
Okay.
get Jim now. I tried earlier on, but he must have walked away. So let's give it a try. If I don't get him now, I'll start questions with you first, because I do have a segment of just questions for you before I have questions for Jim. So let's try Jim first.
Okay, but I would like to be able to see myself on the screen while you're asking questions of me, so I know.
Oh,
Yeah, but right now I have no image of myself. But you're clear full screen. Okay, you went away and came back again. It says Shriley is using a device that could record or broadcast this call, which is what it should say.
I'm trying to call Jim at the moment, but failing miserably.
Well, I see you, but I don't see either of us now.
Yeah, Mike Flavin, who is viewing currently the stream, says he does see both of us, so that's good. I'm not getting Jim, so I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to requisite my phone, which was acting as a second camera while I was performing. And I'm going to give Jim a call. If I don't get him, I will,
There's nothing. Oh, now, all right. Oh, something just came up, which is good.
okay. So everyone who's watching, I'm just going to give Jim Scott a call. I've muted the Skype signal so that you don't hear all this craziness that's going on. But bear with me while I give Jim Scott a call. Hopefully I get him. Oh. Is Jim there? No, he's not. Hi, Jim. We were trying to Skype you. We're ready for you.
I do not hear Jim at all.
Don't worry. Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to call you now then. You stay there. So let's try this. I'm calling you on Skype now. I'm calling Jim on Skype now. I was talking to Herb and everyone else who's watching.
Okay.
Is your phone ringing, Jim? I see it saying here that it's ringing. Calling James Scott. Oh, all right. 1 second. I'll try again.
Yeah, there it goes.
Oh. Oh, great. It shows that you have joined. Can you turn your video camera on? Have you indeed joined us?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna terminate the phone call. Okay.
Okay, now I can see you, Jim.
Yay! Everyone, please welcome James Scott and Herb Deutsch while I try and get them sorted out on the screen. I am glad we ironed out the technical issues here somehow. But it always happens, doesn't it? Just when you hope that things would run smoothly, there's always a technical hiccup. But that kind of is the that's the fun part of it, I suppose.
Though that goes all the way back to the early days with Bob Moog in 1964.
All right. Speaking of Bob, let's begin our questions. I do have various sets of questions, as I mentioned earlier on. I have one set. I'll begin with a set of questions for Herb, then I'll transition to a set of questions for Jim, and then I'll go back to Herb again. So when I say a set of questions, they kind of go from one to the next till a certain point. Then I'll jump to the next person. And at some point in there, I might say either of you have a response to that kind of thing. So let's start with Herb. There's a lot of...
I will make my answers as short as possible and as clear.
You have been well schooled in Shirley's music and chat requirements. All right, so Herb, your meeting with Bob is beyond significant in the annals of electronic music. You met at the New York State Music Educators Conference in '63. You were an educator, composer. He was an engineer, inventor, showing off his theremin. You subsequently invited Bob to a concert consisting of automobile bumper sculptures by Jason Seley at Cornell University, and you went for dinner afterwards where it seems Bob might have sketched away as you indulged in your wish list. Could you tell us more about this dinner and whether there were any drawings on any napkins like you see in a movie?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and I don't believe if there were drawings on napkins, we never saved them. Because it was a meeting right after a concert down in Greenwich Village, New York, in a little Italian restaurant. Well, when you're in Greenwich Village, there are a lot of Italian restaurants, and that's where we were. And yes, the conversation was completely on let's work together to literally figure out how we can build this synthesizer. And we did call it a synthesizer right from the beginning. A lot of people thought that was not true, but there already had been instruments called synthesizers. But our idea was literally, of course, to build one that one could own and keep and carry with him or her to play jobs and do things with.
I do recall RCA had their synthesizer, I think was it the Victor? They did call it a synthesizer, didn't they? Did it stick?
I'm not certain if you're thinking of the theremin.
No, it was a synthesizer.
The RCA.
I was quite sure. Let me check. RCA synthesizer.
Yes, check that.
Yes, created by RCA Corporation in the 1950s.
In the 1950s. Okay, that was something that I never even knew about in the 1950s. So I don't know how long it went. It's probably one of those RCA marketing mistakes because it was something that someone wanted to make into a real thing at a time when it wasn't possible.
Got it.
So I don't know beyond that.
So when you were talking with Bob about the possibility of a machine like a synthesizer, were you talking in engineering terms or musical terms? And did he understand what you were referring to?
Well, that's very interesting because I talk more, of course, in musical terms and in the history of music terms, and Bob understood that he was enough of a musician, as you know, that he was able to talk very well in musical terms, but the question of whether it was engineering terms and musical terms definitely came up several times during those couple of weeks in the summer of 1964. I don't know how much of that, that difference between engineering and musical terms. I could say at this point, which has not been already said, but probably the most important was having to do with musical instruments being things that can articulate sound by giving it an attack, a decay, and all of these are elements that are elements within music that we all have understood without thinking about. But of course we had to think about it when we realized that we were in fact making a new musical instrument, and we did know that in the summer of 1964. We definitely intentionally knew that we were designing what was a new musical instrument, and it needed to speak to musicians.
So there was therefore this doorbell incident then.
Yes.
That could you tell us in a couple of sentences what happened with that doorbell?
Well, the doorbell simply was what Bob realized right away when I talked to him about the articulation of music requiring an attack, a decay, a sustain, and a release. Those terms immediately, these were musical terms. And while they were not applied to an electronic device at that time, Bob understood immediately what I was talking about. And the reason he needed the doorbell was he needed to trigger a sound and then be able to create that triggered sound by changing its attack and its decay. So that we had not, we already had electronic devices. We already had oscillators, a few oscillators, but he did not. He knew right away what it needed, and it took Bob probably a half an hour to write a few things on sheets of paper, and then tell me what to do. Okay, now splice this device, cut the device at this point, put it onto the doorbell, make the doorbell work as a trigger, and all of that was done within literally minutes.
Did he work with you on this as that is, was this a hands-on for you, or did you kind of advise and he got things started and did the engineering part? Were you as nifty with your fingers?
Interesting question. I'm semi-nifty with my fingers, and always have been. So that I liked building things ever since I was a little boy. I liked the idea of building things with my hands. And so the relationship between Bob and me was beautiful. In that relationship. And now he was the engineer. He knew what to hook up, what to touch, what to connect, and I was doing the connecting and touching and hooking up.
Got it. That's very interesting. So, I read somewhere that there were other people who gave Bob ideas while he was synthesizing up a synthesizer, and one of them was a professor by the name of Vladimir Ussachevsky, and it seems that he told Bob, I don't think a keyboard is a good idea, and B, that he was the one who named the ADSR attack, and so on and so forth.
Well, I knew of Vladimir Ussachevsky before I met Bob.
I see.
Because I listened to his music. I had not met him before I met Bob, but I had already listened to his music and his recordings, and I'm going back. I think I actually did meet him.
Okay.
I actually went to Columbia University and met him at their electronic studio. and yes, it was not that he didn't say that it shouldn't have a keyboard. He simply said that the keyboard was not the most important thing.
Ah,
The most important thing was the electronic setups. And
okay.
so the direction that he went to made Bob say to me, and during that summer, it may have been within the first week of that summertime, Bob said, should we have a keyboard? And he said, by that time, I understood why he said that too. Because we were looking for ways of creating new sound and be able to generate new music. And I told him the story, which I think has been told many times, but I'll say it over again. I did say that the great Arnold Schoenberg, the composer who invented 12-tone music in the beginning of the 20th century, that turned the whole Western music world upside down, did it using a keyboard. A piano was still his main instrument.
Absolutely.
So I told that to Bob right away. I said, keeping a keyboard is not going to keep you from discovering all of the electronics and working with the electronics, and it's not going to keep people from exploring the electronics. It simply gives them the opportunity of having an instrument that they can take with them and play anywhere and have ease of controlling.
Do you know if there were significant others who contributed ideas to this first prototype?
Well, now you're asking me a question. Yes, there were, and I'm trying to come up with names. The first prototype, the significant others would have been those who had explored the concept of building and creating music electronically, which actually goes before the prototype, because the idea of the prototype was that it was a handheld, personal held instrument, which was reasonable. The first music synthesizer in America goes back to the beginning of the 20th century. If we were going to start talking about that, I won't go into that because that's a whole fabulous invention. It was actually started to be built before the 20th century, somewhere around 1897, around Boston. I'm not sure of the city.
Okay.
But that instrument, there was, in fact, what
It was Thaddeus Cahill, and it was in New York City, and I think it was electrical, not electronic, and the whole synthesizer was the size of an office building.
Yes.
Ah, that one.
Well, it was moved to New York City. It actually was first built in the Boston area. And yes, it was moved to New York City, but it is a fascinating thing to think about. And I'm suggesting that any of your listeners should look into the idea of this instrument. It was called a Telharmonium. I believe that's the correct name, Telharmonium.
I had a picture of it somewhere, but I can't find it right now. But thanks, Jim, for that helpful hint and beyond.
The thing I did go to make sure, and looking at it, you talking about the RCA Mk II synthesizer. It was the Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center, and the principal composer on it was Vladimir Ussachevsky.
Yeah.
Oh.
Was using the RCA Mk II at Columbia University. That synthesizer was there, but Moog was studying at Columbia, but he didn't know anything about that synthesizer. He didn't even know it was there until after he left college.
Ah. Thanks, Jim. You're very useful. Jim has joined us all the way from Alaska, believe it or not. I'm telling the viewers, of course, in case they don't know or have forgotten, in case I've said it and I have forgotten to myself. But I do have a, let me see, I do have a little clip I'd like to show if I can find it. 1 second, please. Uh-oh. All right, here's a little clip that I edited of you, Herb, talking briefly about the prototype modular synth. This clip I got from the Henry Ford Museum, so hold on.
Okay.
Well, here we are. After 35 years of not seeing this, it's an extreme pleasure to be looking at the actual first complete working prototype of the Moog synthesizer. The basic controls on the very, very first instrument was this box and one keyboard. But within only a few months, Bob realized that both keyboards were necessary because one of the keyboards was immediately designed to operate the envelope control. So you would have a tact decay, which we had talked about when we were first designing the instrument. And a push-button keyboard from a push-button from a hardware store was not going to do the trick. So what Bob did was he designed this upper keyboard with a switch at each individual key. And any key that you press down would tell what note was played, but at the same time, it would turn on a control going to the amplifier. And the exciting thing about this, again, when this instrument was completed, it was still in 1964.
I'm going to end it there, but I don't know how much of it you saw, Herb.
I was unable to see anything, and I could not really hear enough to hear what it was.
Oh, don't.
Were you, Jim, were you?
I didn't see anything. It was very faint. I could barely make out some of what was being said.
That's exactly what I could barely make out the sound.
It's all right. It's all right. Jim?
Yes?
Are you about to say something?
I just said it sounded like Herb's voice being in that clip.
Yeah, I could understand that it was my voice. It was probably from that when I donated the original synthesizer to the Henry Ford Museum, which actually goes back to about 1981. When I donated it.
Wow, you haven't aged a bit.
Thank you.
So do you recall what you did on receiving that synth the first time? Were you familiar with how to get about and around it by then, or was there a learning curve at all?
You're referring to the original synth? Are you referring to the original synth with that question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Was there a learning curve? To some degree, of course. But the original synth, when Bob was able to make it something that could be actually owned and carried, the first ones that he built were immediately sold. Actually, his first sale was to a choreographer, a wonderful dance choreographer for New York City, and I'm talking without remembering his name right now. That's embarrassing, but I drove with Bob from Trumansburg into New York City to his studio in the Village, and we carried it up to the second flight of stairs to his room where he was. He was a major dancer and choreographer, and that was the Bob's first, I believe it was first complete sale of a modular system. You know,
Wow.
the first modular system, which was still in the 1960s. You know.
That's wonderful. So, I don't know if you did answer my question.
No, I wanted to ask again. I
Oh.
don't want to go off.
I was wondering if you're familiar with how to get around it already by the time you received it, or was there a learning curve at all?
Well, there was a minimal learning curve, honestly, because I understood what things were on the instrument right away. Once it became an actual piece of musical instrument.
Right.
I did use the original instrument myself as my own instrument for about 2 years, and even talked my friends and co-workers at Hofstra University that they could put that into the university as the beginning of an electronic music studio.
Ah.
And that goes all the way back to about 1967 or so.
Speaking of all the way back, I put some pictures and made a clip of the concert that a few of you put together for the Jazz in the Gardens at MoMA in 1969, and it seems that Bob received a phone call with, would you like to do a show with your Moog synths? And it seems that four modular synths were put together, finished, so to speak, the day before the concert, and that was the start of the idea of having presets, so that things didn't go too wrong. But let me just run this clip very quickly.
Okay.
Well, here we are.
So this is the program. Herb, you can't see it, but Jim might be able. So that was the program of the Jazz in the Gardens concert, and some photographs, black and
Yes.
white, obviously. So do you have any fond memories of the concert you'd like to mention, Herb?
The Jazz in the Garden concert, I have a lot of memories of it. Was a major event in my life, you know, with Bob Moog, but with the whole change of musical instruments to the world of synthesizers, and good and bad. It was a great concert. It was not altogether a wonderful musical concert. We hoped it would be, but it was a very successful concert, and there were probably about 2,000 people watching in the garden, jammed into the garden of the Museum of Modern Art.
Wow.
And yes, that was an amazing concert. And there were two groups, my quartet and the other quartet. The other quartet, and I'm terrible. I'm very bad at short-term memory now. It's given away. Well, okay. It was
Chris Swanson.
Chris Swanson. Thank you very much.
Yes. He was our studio composer, or composer in residence for a number of years in Trumansburg.
And he was that's right. And he was much more far out than I was at that time, because my idea was to do Jazz in the Garden, and the jazz that I thought of was more like bebop. I wrote a blues tune and a couple of other tunes for that, but we only had one day to rehearse, the modular instruments were not completely ready until the day before the concert. That's been talked about a lot, but it's absolutely true.
Legend has it that Hemseth was still soldering things just before the concert started on stage.
I'm sure they were. Yeah. And I remember going. The instruments weren't. I don't even remember what hotel. I went the night before the concert, and I was able to more or less play on one of the instruments, but they were totally not ready, and it was a wonderful concert to do. It's one I will never forget. I've listened to the music quite a bit, and I've cringed and said, "Oh my God," quite a bit also.
Is there a recording of it somewhere?
We did get things together, and we were able to make that concert work. And it ended when somebody literally pulled the plug out of the wall by mistake.
The whole works was plugged into a single outlet in the middle of the sculpture garden. It was used for like the electric lawnmower. Everything was plugged in that one plug. And she climbed up on the pillar to get a better look, and she kicked out the plug in the middle of Chris Swan's performance, and everybody thought the concert was applauded. And so that was it. Chris didn't get to finish his number.
Yeah, but Chris's music was quite far out and unusual, and so the fact that it ended abruptly, most people thought was a great idea.
One person who was invited to perform there and did not was Herbie Hancock, who was very early in his career, and he thought it could be a disaster, and he didn't want egg in his face that early on in his career, so he declined performing in that concert.
And while I never got a chance to really know Herbie well, I met him a few times. I had actually had a dinner with him once. It was a little bit later than that, but yes, he was there. And the other person who was there is the person who became one of the most amazing Moog people in the world, Wendy Carlos. Walter Carlos was there.
Oh, wow.
Now, Walter Carlos was there, introduced himself to me, and we said hello. I didn't know anything more about him until later. But,
Jim?
But yes, Walter Carlos was there, not Wendy Carlos.
I think he contributed ideas for some of the modules. I think the fixed filter bank was his idea, as I recall. So he was collaborating with Moog in design in the early days, in the 60s.
Yeah.
Thank you for that tidbit. That was useful. Thanks, Herb. Jim, that was also the year that you joined Bob's Merry Men in the Trumansburg business. Is that right? Is that the same year?
Yes, I came to work in September of '69, which is 2 weeks after the concert at the Garden, which was on August 30th.
Were you at the concert? You were at the concert, weren't you?
No, I was just finishing up at Berkeley engineering school, and so immediately when I finished college, my wife and I and the kids got on a plane and flew to upstate New York and started a life there.
Wow. So at Berkeley, were you involved in electronic music as a composer or an engineer or a tinkerer of sorts?
No. I took a course in communication theory with an idea of getting into music somehow.
Oh, which Berkeley was it?
California, not Berkeley, but Berkeley. Yeah,
Thank
Berkeley,
you.
California.
That makes it clearer.
Yeah, in Berkeley, I would have been a musician. I'm certainly not a musician.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
So when you joined Bob's business and the team, did you feel a little left out, or were you a quick learner?
I was kind of overwhelmed. I was, thrown in the deep end to sink or swim immediately because Bob and Bill Hemseth and the other engineer, Chad Hunt, who was working part-time as a grad student, all were experienced circuit designers. I had never designed a practical circuit for anything in my lifetime. I knew the theory, but I'd never done it. So I learned in a hurry partly by studying Bob Moog circuitry.
So who was responsible for hiring you?
Bob Moog.
And what did he say to you? You shall be?
No, no. Well, the way it came about was I heard about Moog in early of '69 in something like late July, August of '69. I went to see Robert Moog at a trade show in Los Angeles, Audio Engineering Society trade show in Los Angeles.
Oh.
And Moog was set up in a room and giving demos of the synthesizer. First time I'd ever seen a Moog synthesizer. So I hung out, and he had a motel room with his equipment in it, including a couple of synthesizers. And he was besieged by people when I talked about Moog. So I got there early, saw his first demos. He ran through explaining how it worked, and then he was just mobbed with people. So I proceeded to give his demo all day long. Because my background in communication theory and my interest in music, I immediately understood how it worked and gave it basic. And finally, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Bob hasn't said a word to me yet, hardly a word, he invites me out into the hallway. Well, actually, at the Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles, there's a balcony that surrounds, at least on three sides, looking down into the dining room. So we went out on the balcony, sat side by side on a bench, and neither one of us knew what to say. So we just sat there staring off space, the two of us. And I'm pretty sure Bob really didn't want to hire another engineer at that point, but here I was, with high interest in the skills. So finally he said, without looking at me, he's still staring down in the and he says, how about $8,000 a year? And I went out turning toward him and said, yes. It was a low ball. It was a couple $1,000s less than what you'd expect at that time for a graduating engineer. I think he was hoping I wouldn't take the job. You couldn't have kept me away.
That's crazy. So I see here that Gene Zumchek was also a member of the engineering team.
Yes, poor Gene, yes. Gene was Moog's first engineer.
Oh.
And he was the first person to campaign vociferously for a live performance synthesizer like the Minimoog. It was his idea to do that.
Oh.
And Bob Moog thought there was no market for it and was not interested.
Yes.
And so then Bill Hemsath, who was, he was a kind of a loner. I kind of went off and did things. And so he simply built the first A model in spare time with spare parts without any authorization, without any funding. Just got a lot of cast off junk and put together the Minimoog Model A. And I came to work one morning, it must have been right around late November of '69. Bob recalls it was finished before Thanksgiving '69. That's the best date we have. And it was sitting on a little table outside the engineering department. He didn't tell anybody anything, nothing. He just, there's the A model, just sitting there. People walk right, what the heck is that thing?
Wow.
And then immediately we had a number of musicians had access to the studio. And both Dave Borden and Chris Swanson loved it. And so then after the A model was built, Hemsath, the assistant of Bob Moog, built a B model. He had no new circuit designs. He was using actual circuit boards out of Moog's previous equipment, the stuff that Herb and Bob had.
So before we jump into more of the meat and bones of the Minimoog, because I've got pictures I want to show as well, I want to just dial it back a few years and talk about the Modular Moog, because I understand that Keith Emerson picked up one of the 4 Moog synths that were played at MoMA, and but before.
That's the synthesizer, right? Oops. Yeah, that is the synthesizer on the Moog right there. Well,
hold on. Let me just move you in the frame so we can see it. Here we are. It's not very clear, but I see that it's on your mug. I see it now.
That is the Keith Emerson, Keith Emerson.
The 1969 concert in the Museum of Honor. One of those instruments is now the bottom half of Keith Emerson's instruments.
Yes, it was the bottom the main bottom module, which is all that I played in the concert in
Oh.
1969, and that was sold within months after the concert to Keith Emerson.
Oh, I think I have a
Then
picture.
it became enlarged. He
Yep.
added more to it.
Let me try and find a picture that I think I have of his Keith Emerson's Moog.
And that Moog, by the way, has been completely rebuilt and rehabilitated by, like, the chief engineer for the present Moog company.
So I do. Thanks,
Yes,
Jim. I
yes,
do have a
well,
picture of it. I happened to go to the Play It Loud exhibition a year ago, last year, wasn't it? And I did take a picture of Keith Emerson's Moog, so it's right there.
But that was his really finished, the complete finished
That was the
mode that he was
complete
playing
one.
in that exhibit.
Got it. I see. Okay, I understand.
It was more complete than when Keith had it, because some of those modules in Keith's instrument were actually dummies. They were just panels with nothing behind them. And when it was rebuilt and put into service, all those modules I had were put into service. So it actually works better than when it ever worked for Keith right now, presently, in its present configuration. I've seen it given in concert once.
I do have a short video clip of Keith kind of talking about the power of his modular synth. So 1 second, please.
Oh, good.
Just dial it up. That's
I
funny.
still use this as part of my keyboard rig because nothing else makes a sound like it, really. When you crank it up in a stadium, it can hurt.
I like the way he says it can hurt. So, I'm not sure if either of you remember who his stage tech was. Who helped maintain his synthesizer?
Oh, yes. Oh, there was someone from the company, from the Moog company, who was named. I don't know. I can't remember, but there was someone who. We were very pleased to know that he went to Keith to England to work with the original instrument.
Ah. Jim, do you recall who it might have been?
I'm not quite sure who we talk about. I know initially Keith got the instrument, he said, with no documentation, which is not true because I wrote documentation for it and sent it when we shipped it because I was the one who prepared Keith's instrument for shipment. And I know I had written a short manual. I found that in the Moog archives at Cornell University 2 years ago. I found the documents. I had written my own original handwritten documents. So I really did send some information, but Keith doesn't recall or never did get it.
Maybe it got stolen. Maybe
It
it's
could have got lost in customs, or the roadie who unpacked it just threw away the paperwork. We don't know.
Yes, right.
that might have happened. That's funny. So, Jim, who was making product line decisions when you joined? Do you remember? Was there a sales and marketing team, or was a specific person making decisions like that? Like, this is what we're going to work on next. When you first joined?
Well, Robert Moog. We had a marketing manager, but he was more oriented toward making sales happen. Our marketing manager was not involved in product concept. It was Robert Moog. It was sort of by consensus, but Bob was president, founder, and chief engineer.
Right.
And at that time, you were absolutely right. Absolutely, he was the chief engineer, the chief idea person.
Interestingly, the instrument that saved the company and made it continue on after 1971 was the Minimoog. That the salvation of the company. And Robert didn't think it had any market.
No.
After we had built the first 10, against his orders, by the way, the engineering department built the first 10 D models when he had orders not to do it. he went on a road trip and we did it anyway. See, well, you can fire all of us, or because we were sure that it had a market. We're sure we're all going to be out of a job anyway.
Yeah.
If we did. And so after we finished the first 10, this is a quote, Robert Moog to me, I doubt we'll ever sell 200 of these things. Robert Moog to Jim Scott.
I don't know of that, but I believe that he would have said that, because when at that time I had been trying to tell Bob that there would be a beautiful market in the education world, that he should be working on instruments and things that could go into the education market, and he did not think that was important, and we had some disagreement about that, and as to break up the disagreement, he gave me 2 of those first Minimoogs. I had 2 Minimoogs of the first run that Bob gave to me. I made the mistake of selling one of them not that long ago, but the other one I still have and use, and it is serial number 94, 1094 of the first.
About April, May of 1971.
Yes, that's right.
Wow.
And I had 2 of them, and I actually sold one because I just figured, well, why not? Who needs 2 Minimoogs? I can't believe that I said that, but yes, I do have one, and I still use and play. In fact, I will tell you that I was playing on it today.
Wow.
I've heard it said that in Europe, at least a few years ago, a vintage Minimoog from Schoenberg, like the one you have with Robert Moog's original oscillator in it.
Yes.
It sounded somewhat better than later Minimoogs, and they were going for $15,000, or was it 15,000 euros in Europe a couple of years ago.
I had heard that, and I had heard that, but never was interested in selling my. It will simply. I don't want to talk about it. It will be in my will.
So were either of you aware of what Bob's intentions were product line wise, if he didn't seem to agree with either Bill and gang's, suggestions going down the portable solution, or thinking of instruments for the education side? What do you think he was thinking of then?
Well, we did have a project for an education Moog, and some of the modules were actually built, or actual cases full of equipment. But I don't know if the whole thing was ever complete. Even one instrument was ever completed of an educational. We call it the Ed Moog, and it was happening in Trumansburg.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was happening without real input from the education world.
Well, you asked about marketing. Marketing really didn't exist.
Yeah.
In a sense of deciding what should be designed and manufactured and put out in the world. The Bob's idea was the synthesizer that you played at Mama, the modular synthesizer with a programming unit, a box about that big with buttons on it. The ones you had like 8 buttons, and you had 8 different sounds. Bob wanted to put that in production, and we actually built a similar instrument for Gershon Kingsley, First Moog Quartet.
Okay, yes.
January 30th, 1970 concert at Carnegie Hall. Okay, and then Gershon Kingsley then went on to put up do an album, and he went on the road and played with Boston Pops and so forth, with a quartet of 4 Moog synthesizers, very similar to the ones that you played at Mama. And Bob's idea was that presettable synthesizer, as a modular synthesizer with a push-button box, was the way to go. And I actually was a design engineer on that push-button box, and I actually designed a new push-button box for the production. Only one push-button box was ever sold to a customer, and it was sold to Keith Emerson on that first synthesis.
Yeah, Keith Emerson sounds like he used to be a collector of synths. Oh, the prototype, I'll have that one. But he did manage to get some out of this world sounds out of it, I must say.
Oh, yeah.
So he was probably the right person to have the ability to say, I want that one.
He was a
The
very
other thing-
imaginative composer, and a good player, a good player, a wonderful improviser, and an imaginative composer within his field.
Mm-hmm. Jim, you were gonna say
Well,
something?
one thing that, about the relationship between concert, the Garland synthesizer, and the Minimoog. If you look at those instruments, they're almost identical in function. 3 oscillators, one of them could be independent as a modulator, 1 noise source, 1 VCA, 1 VCF, 2 VCAs, It's, in fact, the Minimoog is very closely modeled on the 1CA, the instrument you played at Mama.
So
It's that same instrument. It's that same instrument. It's the lower half of Keith Emerson's rig. Keith Emerson eventually played on stage live a 1CA, which is the programmable preset synthesizer, which is the direct ancestor of the Minimoog, and the Minimoog simultaneously on the stage to large audiences. So both instruments are on the stage. He's playing one with one hand and one with the other hand.
wow. So I'm showing a picture of the very first synth modular prototype, and then I'll flash up the picture I took of Keith Emerson's completed modular synth Moog, and then I'll show a picture of the series of Minimoog models from A to D as well. And I'm doing this because once the live stream is done, the video sits on YouTube, so anyone could go back and look at the,
I see.
yeah, they could compare the various features as Jim was describing. Thanks, Jim. So, Jim, I'm curious. We all know the story of how Bill Hemseth took various parts from the synthesizer graveyard and put them together, and we got, an idea of what the Minimoog would be eventually. What were your contributions? Do you remember any specific ones?
Yeah, well, I was not involved at all in the A model or the B model. Those are both done with existing circuit boards. Just used for modular. When we redesigned all the circuitry, starting in the 1st of July 1970s, when we kicked off what we called the C model, which became the D model. So at that point, I was heavily involved in it because I designed the majority of the circuits detail. A lot of them were cribbed from Bob's circuits and simplified or improved. But so a lot of that circuit design in the Minimoog is Robert Moog's as adapted by me. And some of the circuits I did from the start. The other thing was the critical thing when the synthesizer and oscillator stays in tune and it produces an equally tempered scale. And that's a classical analog machine that's based on an electrical circuit called an exponentiator. It produces a mathematical exponential function. An exponentiator produces an equally tempered scale. So when you play a keyboard, you get a musical scale. And so I proposed an exponentiator design to Bob Moog. And then he designed the oscillator. I just gave him the idea. I got a few pages of my logbook to approve it. I still have my logbook from back in the day. And it shows me coming up with the idea for the exponentiator, giving it to Bob, Bob saying, yeah, maybe it'll work. And then he went off and designed the oscillator all by himself.
Oh, that's very interesting.
That oscillator was in 50 units. And then it was discarded. There was nothing really wrong with the oscillator. It was poorly built with poor parts. It could have been rescued. That original circuit that Bob designed in 1970 was put back in production in 2015 by AJ Synth in England, and something called the Minimoog. The Minimoog is a Minimoog parsed apart and put back into modular format. So you can get a Minimoog in modular format from AJ Synth. And the oscillator he chose to use was Bob's original oscillator, not the later ones, because it sounded better.
Wow.
And AJ cleaned up the design a bit, so it stayed in tune better.
And that
But
was
basically the guts of it
sold,
exactly.
and that was, I'm sorry, I was going to say, and that was sold as the Minimoog.
It's
At that time, that name was
Mod,
used.
M-O-D, M-I-N-I-M-O-D. It's available now.
Minimoog.
We have, I've had my hands on a couple of them.
Okay.
As far as we could tell, it sounds exactly like a Minimoog. In fact, it sounds better than most because it was a vintage design. So so A.J. Hall, who designed it, was an engineer and a musician with good ears, and he worked and worked and worked, tried to improve some of the circuits, and found out the original circuits were better than anything he could come up with a modern improvement, which is amazing because it was designed in great haste. A lot of circuitry was designed in great haste, I can tell you for sure, because I designed it. And a lot of the sound quality that makes the Minimoog what it is was not intentional. It just turned out that way. So
were you saying that this happened during 70? Which year was it?
1970 was the Minimoog design.
97. All right.
Developed in 1970.
So,
First one was delivered to customers, here as you can tell, on January 3rd, 71.
all right. So I'm curious about what you thought of, Nolan Industries taking over a couple of years or so after that. You were still with them, weren't you, Jim?
No.
Did you leave?
This company in Trimsburg was in great financial trouble, and the reason Bob Moog allowed the Minimoog project to go ahead, even though he didn't have much hope for selling many, was he was hoping to attract investors into his company. Mm-hmm. He hoped. I've seen a memo where he and Hempstead wrote a memo about telling about the glowing prospects for a Minimoog, when Bob privately was saying, "I don't think we're going to sell any of these things." So it looked at the employee. Hempstead is quite a humorist, the other engineer, and he was always coming with funny sayings. One of them was an investor of the month club. Every month we'd clean up the place, and another investor would come into Schoenberg to take a look at the company and say, "No." Never see him again.
Where does Nolan fit into that group?
It didn't. One of the people looking at the company was Bill Waitena,
yes,
who was an entrepreneur out of Buffalo, who was in the business of buying up failing tech companies, pumping up the books, that is a really crooked set of books, to make it really look good, and then selling it for a profit. We call it, the name of the company was, the umbrella was Venture Technology. We called it Vulture Technology.
That was in 1971, wasn't it?
In 71, Zumchek, remember Zumchek? Got fired by Moog in probably late 69. Yeah. We're not sure whether Zumchek ever saw the A model or not. But right around that time the A model came out, Zumchek was fired. We had to reduce the staff. We were in a lot of trouble financially. And the designer with the least skill as far as a circuit designer was Zumchek, so he was first to go.
Wow.
And Zumchek went to Buffalo and got Waitena and Vulture Technology to start a company called Musonics.
He started Musonics?
Zumchek got Waitena to start Musonics.
Yeah.
So Zumchek and Waitena knew each other because they're both Ukrainians from Elmira, New York. So their families knew one another.
Wow.
And so Zumchek prevailed on Waitena to start Musonics Incorporated in Buffalo, designing Zumchek synthesizer. The actual detailed circuit designer was not Zumchek because he was not a good analog circuit designer, but he certainly knew synthesizers. So the guy there was a contractor, a moonlighter named Fred Reinagel, and Reinagel did all the circuit design on the Sonic, what became the Sonic 5, which later became the Sonic 6. So Musonics, which had a product called the Sonic 5, buys Moog, which has a project called the Minimoog. The Minimoog is supposed to be phased out because the Sonic 5 is designed for mass production, and the Minimoog isn't. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. What sold was the Minimoog, not the Sonic. So it took off and became the mainstay of the company.
Yeah.
So Zumchek proposed the original, what became the Minimoog, although he wasn't around by the time we got really seriously to work on it. But then he was also the creator of the Sonic 5.
Wow.
The Sonic 5, by the way, didn't sound very good. And The reason was a very simple mistake. A year ago, we got a Sonic 6, which is basically a Sonic 5. And I looked at this. I'd never seen this schematic diagrams in all these years. We had one. I was working. And a full set of schematics. I looked at it. I said, this thing should sound as good as a Minimoog. I know what they did wrong. I said, change that resistor. And both said, Sonic 5 or Sonic 6 now can be made to sound almost as good, or maybe in some respects better than a Minimoog, by simply driving the VCA circuit harder.
So you're saying that
This is a
Whoever
world
designed
that I'm not really
it's a basic
involved
philosophy
with
of designers. Engineers tend to try to make things noise-free, which is good, but also distortion-free. Actually, making a synthesizer distortion-free is a big mistake. What makes it sound great is the distortion. It's like pulling a tube out of a tube amp, changing the sound.
So all these ideas gave Bill Wayton his dream come true, because eventually he sold it to Nolan Industries. Then
73, yes. He got control of the company in 71, moved it to Buffalo, which he promised never to do, but he was about as truthful as our president of the United States, Waytena was. I think they came out of the same batch. And so Waytena promised to keep research and development and modular production in Trumansburg and move Minimoog to Buffalo. And before the ink was dry, he had pulled the chain and moved the whole works to Buffalo. Nobody went except Moog, Robert Moog, because he was actually obligated. And I rejoined the company after a couple of years.
I rejoined the company briefly in their first year or two at Buffalo also.
Oh, you
I mean,
did?
but I would working what I was doing is obviously more of the marketing world, and the marketing and the whole area of sales and where it was, and that was my primary thing. I'm not an engineer and not trained that way,
So did you?
I remember the Sonic 5 and Sonic 6 very well, and the Sonic 6 I did feel was a potential educational instrument. That's what it was written for, but it was in my mind, it was too much, too big to be comfortably used in schools and shipped around, because
that's precisely the market it was designed for. It was designed for the educational market. That's where Usanix, Zumchek, Waytena thought the market was.
Yeah.
And so originally it was in a wooden case, and then it was repackaged into a suitcase. We called it the Samsonite synthesizer.
I remember the big suitcase.
So were you guys familiar with EMS at that time? Because that sounds very similar to the Synth EA that ended up being in a suitcase as well.
I was not.
Oh, okay. Jim, were you aware of EMS at that time? No.
Well, I wasn't even when the Samsonite synthesizer came out. I wasn't working for the company. That was like 72, and I came back to work in 73, late 73. So they were producing the Sonic 6 when I went back to work. The Sonic 6 is a Sonic 5 repackaged for stage performance by making it portable.
I see. What are your...
The missing ingredient was the VCA was not driven into distortion. And we tried one, a lab one. Ben Luce played it, and he couldn't keep his hands off of it for a week after he got the Sonic 6, and we modified it to increase the distortion.
So from there and being bought out by Nolan Industries, so we arrive at the constellation of synths. Anyone want to add?
Yeah, that was about 72, right?
I would. What I would add is that in 73, I was actually hired by Jim Henson and the Muppets.
Oh, really?
And the thing that Jim Henson was so excited about is that I knew about electronic instruments. That was such a totally new thing. But no, I was not involved in the design of any instruments, whichever I actually did come up with a couple of instruments which I thought were going to be very interesting instruments for children, but never went beyond that first dream, although a couple of models were made.
Oh, so you're saying that Jim Henson was interested in getting involved in synthesizers for children? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
it wasn't that he was involved in, what he was involved was looking how he could reach for children in every way.
Oh.
And he definitely liked the idea that he had a person who was involved with synthesizers. And I became very much a very good part of the Jim Henson world for quite a few years, a number of years, and really, well, obviously before his death, but...
So were you on like a marketing consultant type of situation?
That's interesting. I guess you can call. I never would have called myself officially a marketing consultant, but that was the kind of thing that I was doing. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I didn't know this bit of information. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Do you have any specific memories of your 2 years with Jim Henson? Any interesting anecdotes you'd like to share?
You know, those years were in a strange way part-time because Jim Henson's in New York, and I stayed teaching at Hofstra University.
Oh.
In fact, for a brief time during that, I was chair of the music department, and I had worked out a crazy session for myself where I would be teaching. Or for a long time, I taught 3 days a week, or Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, or something like that. I don't remember. It was true, and the rest, and drove into the city, and always would be parked by where the Muppets office was, the Jim Henson office was. Oh. So I was driving back and forth between two jobs for a number of years. Wow. A time that was exciting. Exciting for me, but also very tiring, and it had effects at some point on really on my ability to follow through with a lot of it. I was primarily loved being a teacher, and so even with that, my teaching in work world was really what I focused on primarily. That's a whole other story, because I ended up being the chair of the music department for a very nice university, Hofstra University, and that kind of helps take me through a lot of those years.
Thanks, Herb. So, Jim, speaking of straddling two jobs, you were hired or rehired, or something happened here, but David Luce took over the position of director of R&D when Bob left, and he decided that you would be the man to join the team to work on the constellation of synths, the Apollo, the Lyra, and the Taurus bass pedal, as they were named then.
No. I had very little to do with the constellation. It was in the works when I was hired back in late. I left in '71. In late '71, the company was moved to Buffalo. In '73, David Luce and Tom Ray, who was the marketing manager at the time, recruited me to come back to work for the company, which I did. And so I worked for the company on and off until '79, from '73 to '79.
Got it.
But the constellation was already in the works. They already had a functioning Apollo, which was a precursor of the Moog, and they had built one Lyra, which was supposed to be the replacement of the Minimoog. The Lyra never made it to market. It was a monosynth, and they built the third part of the constellation was a Taurus bass pedal, which turned out to be very successful. Yeah. And the Taurus was designed by David Luce. That was his. I guess that was his first design project. And David Luce not with us anymore. His son and I have taken a look at the Taurus to find out what it makes sound so good. And I've done a good look at the circuitry to point out features of it. And then David Luce's son, Ben, who's a PhD in theoretical physics, cosmologist and particle physicist, and a nonlinear mathematician, has mathematically analyzed the Taurus to find out what his dad did. Between the two, figured out a lot of what makes the Taurus. And it's subtle things. Luce's background, his PhD in physics, and his thesis was in musical acoustics at MIT. In fact, in his early career before he came to Moog, he designed the highly advanced synthesizer, which never made it to market because of all kinds of problems. And it still has never been seen the light of day. Luce got frustrated with the synthesizer that he and Melville Clark done. Melville Clark was his thesis advisor. The two of them developed the synthesizer based on his PhD thesis. It was a marvelous instrument. I've heard recordings of some clips done on it. One of them, I guess, was built, and then it was never going to make it to market because Clark was going to spend forever being doing research projects on it and never getting it to market. So Luce quit and went to work for Moog. There is a lot of threats of lawsuits for patent infringement and that and non-competition, under which David Luce always had to operate under that cloud, be careful what he didn't do. So we didn't get sued. So Luce was hired on to become Bob Moog's replacement, which happened several years down the road.
Yes.
Moog
I would like to jump in here a little bit because, yes, I know that I did say that I had, in a sense, left the Moog world to go into to a different world. In 1980, I was still very much in the Moog world and close to Dave Luce. And in fact, in 1980, I talked to Dave about the idea of building a different instrument.
Oh.
I was a club date musician for much of my life, and I said, the world needs an instrument that can give you strings, organ, brass sounds easily and quickly. And actually, in 1980, I believe it was in 1980 and complete, or maybe it was 81. Or it was in 80 that Bob and I literally sat down and spent only a few weeks coming up with a new instrument. The instrument was an instrument which ended up being called the Opus 3 Moog, which is an instrument that creates strings, organ, and brass. I called it the Opus 3 because we were still a Norland company. And I didn't want to call it the Opus 3. I like the idea of strings, organ, and brass. So I called it the SOB synthesizer. And Norland said, "Oh, no, you can't do that." They literally told me that I could not call it that. So I changed was forced to change my mind and called it the Opus 3 synthesizer. And that instrument, there are Opus 3s that are still around playing very well. But I was not fully in the synthesizer world at that time anymore.
And this would have been after Moog left the company in '77, so that gives you an idea.
So Bob was involved in that idea of the Opus 3 under the Nolan Industries umbrella?
Yeah.
Oh.
It definitely was. I don't know. I don't think Bob was fully working at the company at that time, but I think, Jim, you were right. He probably was not. I was certainly not fully working on it, but I stayed up there for about 2 weeks straight developing this new instrument. I would go in every day and stay in some, I don't remember where I stayed at night, but
they must have hired Bob back as a consultant because he had his own company by then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
maybe it was.
Big Briar was, he couldn't call it Moog because he didn't own his name anymore.
That's right.
And he didn't get his name back until 2002, a couple of 3 years before he died. That's how Moog, he started a company called Big Briar, and it did a lot of special works. And then he developed the Moog Voyager under Big Briar, and then he got his name back, so he renamed it his Big Briar Moog Music Incorporated. So the modern Moog Music Incorporated was actually founded by Robert Moog. A totally different, business entity than the original Moog Music Incorporated.
So, Herb, since you mentioned, working with David Luce, I remember when we last spoke, you mentioned the Realistic Concert Mate MG1 synth that was built for Radio Shack.
I was just thinking of that now, because yes, I don't have one, but I do have a very lovely photograph of it, which I took when literally the day that we worked on that design, and we designed it for so who's the rock keyboard player. Oh my gosh, I can't say his name. But a major English rock keyboard player, a major.
You're talking about Wakeman or somebody?
Elton John.
Elton John.
Yeah. And we had wanted to show it to him, and drove it down. We flew it down to a concert that he was doing, and I took a picture. There were two of us from Moog. I photographed him holding it, playing around with this new instrument. He didn't play it, but he was holding it and doing crazy little things like holding it between his legs and all kinds of silly things. But yes, we that instrument was the last instrument that I was in any way involved with. But that the Opus 3 was an instrument that should have been called the SOB. It was a wonderful string organ brass instrument. I just had mine rebuilt completely. Is it possible? Is it okay for me to say who rebuilt it? Or would you rather? He's a wonderful Jareth Lackey, and those of you who know rebuilding synths and electronic instruments would know that he's an excellent technician. Jareth Lackey. He's in the southern part of the United States,
right.
And it's really a terrific instrument now that I've gotten it back and playing the way it should be.
So it never went into production, did it? The Opus 3, did it?
It definitely went into production. It went into production as it was sold to Radio Shack, and they sold it as the realistic synthesizer.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Bob called me once at Moog when I was working there, and he said, why is my name on this instrument? I didn't give you permission to put my name on it. And it was called the Realistic Instrument by Radio Shack. If you looked at the back in little letters, that had to say that it was built by Moog Music, the actual people who built it.
Wow.
And, I don't think Bob was really
Moog Music
angry,
was.
But he was pretending to be angry.
Because Bob didn't have any control of it. Norland owned Moog. Bob didn't own his name for 20, 30 years.
Yeah. Coincidentally, I have a little clip of the Realistic Concert Mate. For those of you out there who've not seen it, I had a friend, I think it was Tom Brislin, keyboard player for Kansas, who owned one. I don't know if he still owns one, but here's a quick clip. Sorry. There you go. I managed to cut it.
Didn't hear too much of it.
Oh, You probably have to watch the video again when it's all done, but I just wanted to show whoever's out there who's viewing, who's never seen a realistic concert made before, that's how it looked like, the way, the size of it and what it can kind of somewhat do. So, Jim, we spoke to, and I'm asking you this question because when we last spoke, you mentioned this, but I had, when we had Peter Zinoviev on as guest 2 weeks ago, he told us of a trip he made to the U.S. to interest musicians in the Putney, nickname for the VCS3, and amongst other electronics. And he remembers this exercise as being difficult, and he also admits to not being terribly interested in the pop world, despite the fact that musicians such as members of Pink Floyd, Pete Townsend of The Who, Brian Eno, Jean-Michel Jarre, Stockhausen, and so on and so forth, made such memorable sounds with the EMS synths. According to you, Jim, when we last spoke, you mentioned that he might have approached Bob in an effort to find a distribution channel for the Putney.
Yes, this would have been about after I came to work for the company, fall '69, early days, before we got going seriously on the Moog. At that point, we had the programmable preset, the one that Herb played at the Concert of the Garden. The Putney was most discussed distributor for Putney.
Jim, you're breaking up. I can't quite seem to make out what you're saying, and I'm not quite sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was too close to the mic.
Okay.
Zinoviev wanted the Moog company to distribute the Putney in the United States, or at least was exploring the idea. And he sent one to Trumansburg around early 1970. And we had it there, and we looked at it, and we didn't think it had that much potential as an instrument that we could market. At that same time, Robert Moog went to England to discuss possibility with Zinoviev, to discuss possible contract. And while Moog was there, Zinoviev showed him, technically how various functions work. And finally, Moog says, "Well, you have some music produced on this instrument." And Zinoviev was insulted. He says, "Sir, this is a laboratory."
So, what do you remember if Peter was referring to the synthesizer or his studio? Do you recall?
I think they didn't make music on that synthesizer because his operation was not geared toward making music. It was geared toward making instruments.
Yeah, I remember when we had him on as guest, he was, as I was saying earlier on, he was quite disinterested in the pop music world. He was more interested in the more esoteric, more experimental stuff. And when I asked him why they decided to put EMS together, he said, to fund the equipment that he wanted to buy for his studio. As you know, he had two PDP-8 computers, which cost like 40,000 pounds, I think it was, each. And one of them was funded by a Tiara that his wife owned, that they sold for that amount, 40,000 pounds. I believe it was pounds. But I also read somewhere that Bob actually approached EMS as potential investors in the company during a period where Bob's company wasn't doing so well. At least the business was flailing a little. Do you know anything about this?
No, I had never heard that.
No, I don't. Neither have I.
In '69, the company peaked. They were selling modular systems right and left, and building up the staff. And by the end of 1970, Robert Moog had pretty much saturated the market. There's only so many people out there with $15,000 to put an instrument in a studio.
Yeah.
And Tom Ray, who was the marketing manager for the Moog Company on and off several times. Tom Ray visited Moog in '69 before I got there. It was sometime in '69. And Moog is extolling on how great the sales was. And Tom Ray says, was a grad student at the time, Peabody. And he said, what are you going to do after the modular synthesizer? And Bob's like taken aback. Like, what are you talking about? And Tom said, you've saturated the market. Where do you go next? And Robert Moog just refused to see it. You asked about marketing before. Well, there was a person in charge of marketing, but they didn't really do any marketing. There was no surveys to see what musicians wanted. We sort of did. The reason the Minimoog came about because several of us pushed Moog into it. And we pushed because we could perceive that there was a market for it because we were working with musicians.
That is very true.
Yeah.
And Tom Ray was a very good, very excellent critic.
He was very
where things were going. That was what Tom Ray's strength was. I don't know if it still is. He is definitely still living.
I correspond with him. We were working on projects together. Tom and I are.
Yeah.
And he's proud of the fact that the Moog Company fired him 3 times and he quit twice. Marketing.
And I was there during probably the first and second time he was fired. I wasn't the one who did it, but I was there during those times. He
was almost invariably right, but he wouldn't shut up about it. He would get crosswise with management. They'd fire him, and then the management changed. Well, we better get Tom back because he's the guy that really knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So we are nearing the second hour, believe it or not. And I have one final question for the two of you, because I'm quite sure that you guys want to get to bed, or at least Herb will probably. 9, 10. Yeah, you're getting close to yours. Jim, you still got some day left.
It's 6 p.m., but the sun went down 2.5 hours ago.
Almost time for your dinner, right?
Well, what's day and what's night's kind of arbitrary when the day is only 5 hours long.
Yeah,
and actually the sun is above the trees so you can see it for about 2 hours a day.
Wow. How is it like in Alaska these days? Weather-wise, at least. Are you experiencing much more snow? Because I remember the first time we spoke, you had some snow and you're waiting for someone to help you remove the snow. What you call it? I can't think of the word right now. I'm sorry. The snow plow.
Yeah.
Someone to try to take the snow away from your driveway. I think that was what I was trying to say.
I have to get it plowed once in a while. It's over a half mile long. Oh. And the snowpack now, if you just go out in the woods, is knee deep. If you step through it, you're up to your knees.
Ouch.
So, and it's unless we get some kind of a thaw, it'll be there until April. It'll just keep going.
Great. How about Herb? Are you snowing where you are yet?
Well, it has been snowing, but not feet long. There was a rather heavy snow here on Long Island. A heavy snow here could be 14, 16 inches. Of snow, and we've had a bit of that, but it's quite cold, and unfortunately, much of the snow has turned to ice. It's very cold and damp.
Right.
But it's when it's what you get used to every year.
Absolutely. Well, before I ask the last question, what are you guys planning for Christmas? I'm sorry. I guess not a lot of family get-togethers. Will you be doing your, at least with Herb, you'll be with Nancy for Christmas, I suppose?
Yes, I will be with Nancy, and it is possible that I will be with my daughter, who lives relatively close to us.
Oh, nice.
Yes, I mean relatively close, like perhaps 20 miles from us. And travel here is probably not a problem. The problem is, is obviously the question of
how close should you be during an epidemic?
Yeah.
And we haven't made a final decision on it, and we're probably going to pass on having any kind of a really crowded Christmas.
Yeah.
And by really crowded, I would say more than 6 people is crowded.
Yeah, I agree. Jim,
I do the same I did for Thanksgiving. I cooked a Thanksgiving dinner and then ate it all myself over the course of a week because I'm out here by myself.
Does it mean you're gonna make a turkey?
I did for Thanksgiving. I think I'm doing a ham.
You're gonna do ham for Christmas?
Yeah, because I got a ham. I just got it out of the truck. It's frozen. So I just leave it out in the truck.
I was gonna ask you, are you gonna dig a hole in your living room floor and fish like you see in the movies?
No. I guess there's some ice fishermen around. There's a lot of lakes.
That's definitely a question for Jim.
I'm not a fisher person. It always bothered me watching the poor animals asphyxiating and on the riverbank next to you. So I quit fishing when I was a teenager. It's like what you had to do to the fish.
I tried fishing once and I didn't catch anything, so I thought, well, I guess fishing is not my kind of sport or activity.
Yeah.
It takes.
Well, I live on Long Island, which is an area where there's a lot of fishing taking place.
Oh.
No, I was never into it at all. I probably took, when my son was still little, I may have taken him fishing, but for this, I've never really felt that it's pleasant to take something out and kill it like that. If you're going to eat it, that makes a little sense. But no, I've never been much into any kind of sport killing of animals.
I hear you.
Well, the catch and release people who catch the fish and throw it back, yes.
Yeah.
The thrill of catching it, not killing it or eating.
I did a little of that. I did a little of that.
I would like to learn how to fish the right way, just for the sake of knowing how to throw a line and all that. But maybe one day I will. So viewers out there, do you have any questions? I see a lot of chatter, and I've been asking a lot of questions, I know, and I have one final one, but anyone with a good question you want to ask that covers an area we haven't covered yet? Well, while I wait, because as you know, it takes about 30 seconds or so to get to them, for them to think of something, type it in, and for it to come back to us. But my final question is, both of you have lived a very interesting life, and the journeys that you took in this area of synthesizer innovation. Do you have any... oh, hold on. Is there a question? No question. If you had to describe one thing that made that adventure special, what would it be for each of you? When I say special, it could be something that opened your mind to, a series of things, or an activity that you thought could never take place, or maybe you met someone in the course of the journey that really impacted the way you saw synthesizer innovation, or something to that effect.
Okay, I can have something to say, and it's a very simple thing to say. I've been a college professor almost my entire life, and teaching the history of music, in the world for perhaps 45 years of my life. I was a college professor for over 50 years in one college. Much of what I taught is the history of music. The thing that is most exciting to me and most important to me is that I've been able to be a part of what is the entire history of where music is going and has gone and will go, because I was involved with the creation of a new musical instrument and a new way of listening to music and a new way of deciding what was good or bad music. It all depends on the fact that we were working with sound in an entirely different way, and our hands to create that sound in entirely different ways.
Wow, yeah. I have no words to say to that, but yes. And Jim?
Well, yeah, I don't know if this exactly answers the question, but the last synthesizer project I worked on was with Bob Moog, and he and I and Tom Ray designed the Krumar Spirit, which is only a few hundred were ever manufactured. It's a complete failure in the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's now a very highly regarded instrument because it was designed kind of as the penultimate monosynth in the line starting with the Minimoog, where all of our best ideas went into this instrument. I did the detailed circuit design. The overall functioning was largely Tom Ray. And Robert Moog was leading the project and working with a manufacturer, which was Krumar in Italy. So after that project, that was the last design project I ever worked on. I got out of electronic music, didn't look back, forgot about it, didn't tell anybody, didn't follow what was going on. It was out of it for about 35 years. I just simply didn't go there anymore. Partly out of frustration because some very good ideas of mine didn't actually become a reality until 30 years later. I had to design, for example, an instrument very similar to the Moog Voyager that was functioning prototype, and we're actually starting to order parts for it in 1979. It was basically a Moog Voyager in 1979. And it was the first version of the memory Moog, which nobody knows about. But the earliest memory Moog was designed by me 77 to 79. And so when that was shelved by Norland, another one of their great marketing decisions, I quit Moog forever, and then a few years later, I quit for good when I finished the Spirit. And then I was out of Moog for a long time. I had no idea what had happened. I had no idea that whatever happened to the Minimoog. For all I knew, 3 years ago, all the Minimoogs ever built were in a landfill someplace. I just did not know. And it was very gratifying to find out that it was a highly regarded instrument, or almost a reverenced instrument.
Yeah. It's interesting. Sorry, Jim.
So that got me back into electronic music a few years ago, and that's why we're here. And this thing about the Minimoog was there were so many things we did right, and a number of things we did right were accidental. I mean, the fact that the superior sound quality comes from overdriving or distorting the DCA I intentionally overdrove and distorted the DCA, but not to produce the entire sound quality. I was just worried about signal to noise ratio.
Right.
With a crosstalk, hiss, hum, clicks, radio station pickup or whatever. Couldn't pick up. I did that for the very first C model. Overdrove the circuitry because it was going to be shown. The C model was finished was completed well enough to show in the motel room the night before it was presented to the Audio Engineering Society convention in New York City in the fall of '70. So it comes several days before before Moog is going to deliver his paper introducing the Minimoog to the planet and giving a live performance in front of a critical audience. These are audio engineers. And so the first Minimoog Model C is being put together on my workbench, and it's like Frankenstein scene. Each of us, the 4 engineers working on it, each had built part of it. And we put it all together on this and started wiring it up with no wiring diagrams. And toward the end, I had to decide how hard to drive the sound chain. Right. Well, I decided just overdrive it like heck so it would sound okay, so that we wouldn't pick up any crosstalk. So I overdrove it by 10 or 15 dB. ChemSat says it tells the world I made a miscalculation. It turned out right. Not true. I didn't calculate anything. I just had it in the bench and I kept cranking up the gain and looking at the waveforms on the scope and seeing that they're not clipping, so we're going to be in good shape. And so it went to the trade show with heavily overdriven VCAs. Turned out to be that's the key secret to the Minimoog sound. That's why it sounds so good. All engine engineers, by instinct, try to reduce distortion. Wrong move. The right move is to get about distortion. In fact, people nowadays with Minimoogs know to even increase it beyond. So,
isn't it interesting the number of things that we discover are better due to a mismatch or an adjustment that we didn't realize we were doing? It's just wonderful how these things happen. And it's...
We didn't really appreciate how good what the distortion was doing for us. And Ben Lewis is a mathematician of me. I've been studying the Minimoog very carefully in the last few years as part of a research project and discovering more and more about what we did. Again, Ben can do the mathematics. I can. It turned out that I analyzed the distortion in the Minimoog in 1976. I know it because I have my logbooks and there's all the calculations. And what I did was I derived a set of equations that described the distortion. I couldn't solve them. I didn't have the mathematical skills, but I could graph the curves and use it for design purposes. Come about 2 years ago, I showed those equations to Ben Luce, our mathematician. He says, "Oh, that's a hyperbolic tangent function. You just multiply through this factor, and bang, out comes a simple equation." It's like in 15 seconds. So I picked up that analysis from 76, and once Luce informed me what the solution to the equation was, I wrote a whole paper on that.
Wow.
Subject distortion.
That's beautiful.
But, sure.
Ben Luce has been in contact with me and just certainly not in that world because that is not my strength. But I have been in touch with Ben a few times regarding his father and where he is and the things that he's been doing.
I knew him when he was a teenager, 15 years old, and he was a piano student, a classical piano student. Since then, he and his wife have become folk musicians, and besides being a theoretical physicist.
Yeah.
And so he has done a lot of mathematical analysis of the Minimoog. A lot of it, we're working together on it. I critique what he does. Sometimes he makes mistakes, and he's not an engineer in measurements, making lab measurements. I correct that. Then I make mistakes in the mathematics, and he corrects that. So.
Well, it's such an adventure. Life is the people that we meet walking down the street, and the people that we meet and work with each day. And I'm very grateful to have met you guys, and thanks so much. I don't see any other questions from our guests, our viewing audience. I mean, everyone seems to be quite charmed by the two of you and great stories that they've been quite taken by, but I'm reading the live chat this way. My live chat's on my right side. But thank you to you, Herb Deutsch, and Jim Scott. I call you Jim, but everyone has to call him James. Remember that? But
nobody calls me.
I want to thank both of you for being a gem in our history of synthesizer innovation and invention. And glad that you spent the time with us to talk about all the good things that have taken place throughout history and people that you've met and the wonderful innovation that's taken place. For everyone, you know where Moog Music is now. They are in Asheville, and the Moog legacy lives on there. I want to thank also Cornell University, Henry Ford Museum, Dr. Ben Luce of EMIAP, which is short for Electronic Music Education and Preservation Project, and many others for their rich archives that I've looked through to try and gain insight and sometimes pictures or videos for today's broadcast. Everyone, please say thank you to the fine gentleman here, and an applause for the two of you. I also have this animated GIF in the form of a "You're Awesome." Herb Deutsch and Jim Scott, you are both awesome, and thank you so much again for your valuable time. I might bring you guys back again sometime. That would be fun, I think.
Well, you are very welcome for the thanks.
Yes, I enjoyed the opportunity to set the record straight because there's a lot of mythology out there that
Yes.
is people either guessing what happened or making stories out of that, or self-aggrandizing and taking credit for something I did or somebody else did.
Yeah, I've noticed that as I referenced several different sites and papers, I noticed a lot of contradictions, or at least stories painted differently, you know, and it was quite difficult to try and figure out who is saying it truthfully or which ones are made up to sound better than the truth.
What I can say was almost everything I say, I've got hard documentation.
That's what I like to hear.
That's good. That's
My
good.
memory is proven faulty on a number of occasions, and so I try not to rely on that.
I understand. Well, once again, thanks, Herb and Jim. And now that we know how to get you guys on Skype, when we try to get next time, we shall have no failures or technical glitches, right?
Yes,
Okay.
good.
Well,
I'm always happy to have the opportunity to set the record straight.
of course. Likewise, I'm glad you guys were here with us. Have a great Christmas, Happy New Year,
you.
and whatever other festival that you're celebrating. I guess I'll probably see you again next year.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. I think we will.
Okay.
I would definitely. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, I hope so. Hope, say hi and bye to Nancy for me.
I will. I will certainly do that. She's not really near me right now.
Okay.
But I certainly will say hi and bye to Nancy because she is the person who has helped me do everything, including getting myself onto this program with you. Okay.
Thanks, Herb. Thanks,
Okay.
Jim. Jim,
You're
you
welcome.
stay warm and take
Jim.
care. And both of you stay safe, please.
Thank you. And Jim, it's great talking to you too. Wonderful.
Well, there's an old saying, no such thing as bad weather, it's only the wrong clothes.
That's
I
good.
will have to
like it.
quote you on that. Thank
That's
you.
good.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye now.
Goodbye.
That was so much fun. I didn't expect to run overtime. I had actually planned to maybe spend an hour and a half with them, but we're over 2 hours. I know we had some technical issues and I started late. I think I started 15 minutes late. I think so. But still, that was about 2 hours, yeah? So, hey guys, I see so many virtual bodies, but no one else except my regulars have decided to make themselves known in the live chat. And boy, my head was spinning and reeling in all those anecdotes and stories that we were being told by Herb and Jim. I think I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. And if I do, I'll probably have a wonderful dream about the history the history of these synth adventures. Anyway, speaking of good guests and well-behaved guests, I have a list of awesome guests for next year for 2021. And I hope you'll join me then. I can't wait. I've got shall I tell you? I've got Carlos Raphael Rivera, who composed for Queen's Gambit, the hot Netflix miniseries that's on right now. I might have someone from The Mandalorian. I don't know yet. We're still confirming it, but I'm quite excited. We're also going to have Lee Stringer back. Lee Stringer has worked as VFX supervisor on various iconic films. And many others, so you gotta join me. But before I bid you adieu, I am making a post office drop on Monday should you wish to own my collector's set, which is this one. If you do wish to, please message me. You can put a comment in the below the video if you like, or send me a message via live chat. But I want to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season. If you're celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas for this coming Thursday or Friday? Friday, isn't it? And subsequently, a Happy New Year. I'll see you back next year. And I'll see you at my next broadcast. Please bring your friends along. The more the merrier, I say. Okay then, I shall bid you goodbye. Take care now.